The ocean roared. A primal scream that drowned out the chaos in my head. I stood on the edge of the world, toes sinking into the cold, wet sand of Cape Cod, watching my stepson, Eli, chase the tide. His laughter, sharp and reckless, sliced through the dusk, pulling me into a moment I wasn't ready for. I'm Daniel, 42, a man who thought he'd mapped out his life, a stable job as a high school history teacher, a quiet marriage to Claire, and a stepson who'd been a stranger for most of the 10 years we'd shared a roof. Claire's death 2 years ago shattered that map, leaving me and Eli to navigate the wreckage. This beach trip was supposed to be our Reseda chance to mend the distance between us. But nothing prepared me for the way Eli's hand would find mine under the fading sun, or the way my heart would betray me by not pulling away. We'd arrived at the rental cottage that morning, a weathered gray shack perched on a dune. Eli, now 20, had grown into someone I barely recognized, tall, lean, with his mother's sharp green eyes and a restlessness that made the air around him hum. He'd been distant since Claire's passing, buried in his art school projects or his late-night drives to nowhere. I thought this trip would be simple, a week of fishing, bonfires, maybe a few awkward conversations to bridge the gap. But as we unpacked, his glances lingered too long, and I felt a heat I couldn't name. Dan, you ever think about starting over? Eli asked, tossing a duffel bag onto the couch. His voice was casual, but his eyes pinned me, searching for something I wasn't sure I could give. Starting over's for people who know what they want, I said, dodging. I'm just trying to keep up. He smirked, a half-cocked grin that made my chest tighten. You're doing better than you think. That afternoon, we walked the beach, the wind biting through our jackets. Eli talked about his art, his voice alive with a passion I envied. He described a painting he was working on a storm-tossed ship, splintered but defiant. It's about surviving, he said, kicking at a shell. About choosing to keep going, even when the world tells you to sink. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, caught on the way his shoulder brushed mine as we walked. It was innocent, accidental, or so I told myself. But when he stopped to face the ocean, his profile sharp against the horizon, I felt a pull I hadn't felt in years. Not since college, when I'd buried a part of myself to fit the life I thought I was supposed to live. Dan, he said, turning to me, his voice softer now. You ever feel like you're hiding from something? The question hit like a punch. I wanted to laugh it off, to say he was reading too much into the salt air and the sunset. But his eyes held mine, and I saw something raw there, something that mirrored the ache I'd spent years ignoring. Before I could answer, he stepped closer, his hand grazing mine. My pulse spiked, a warning I ignored. The world narrowed to the sound of the waves, the warmth of his fingers, and the terrifying truth that I didn't want to pull away. That night, the cottage felt too small. We cooked dinner-grilled fish and potatoes, the kind of meal Claire would have loved. Eli was quiet, sketching in a notebook while I cleaned up. I caught glimpses of his work, bold lines, a figure standing against a storm. Was it me? Was it him? I didn't ask. I poured a glass of whiskey and sat on the porch, the ocean a dark murmur in the distance. Eli joined me, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. "Can't sleep?" he asked, sitting closer than necessary. "Too much quiet," I said, though it was a lie. The noise in my head was deafening guilt, desire, and the ghost of Claire whispering that I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Eli leaned back, his shoulder against mine. "You know, Mom always said you were the strongest person she knew. But I think you're scared." "Scared of what?" My voice was rough, defensive. "Of being you." He didn't look at me, just stared at the stars. "The real you. The one you don't let anyone see." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong. But the truth was a weight I'd carried too long. I'd married Claire because I loved her, but also because she was safely a shield against the questions I didn't want to answer. Now, with Eli so close, those questions were clawing their way to the surface. His hand found mine again, deliberate this time. My breath caught, and for a moment, I let it happen. His fingers were warm, steady, and I didn't push him away. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Eli humming in the kitchen. He was making pancakes, his hair a mess, his grin easy. "Figured we needed fuel for today," he said, sliding a plate toward me. I forced a smile, but my mind was a storm. Last night had been a mistakey moment of weakness I couldn't let happen again. He was my stepson. He was Claire's son. And yet, the memory of his touch burned. "We should head into town," I said, desperate for a distraction. "Get some supplies. Maybe check out the pier." Eli nodded, but his eyes said he knew I was running. "Sure, Dan. Whatever you want." The town was a postcard of New England charm-clabbered shops, lobster traps stacked by the docks, tourists snapping photos. We wandered, picking up groceries and fishing gear. But the tension between us was a live wire. Every brush of his arm, every shared glance, felt like a dare. At the pier, Eli leaned against the railing, watching a fisherman haul in a net. "You think people can change?" he asked. "Like, really change who they are?" I hesitated, my throat tight. "I think people can stop pretending." He turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Then why are you still pretending?" The question hung there, unanswered, as the gulls screamed overhead. I wanted to tell him I was and that I was just a man trying to do the right thing. But the truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. And Eli, with his fearless honesty, was forcing me to find out. The pier creaked under our weight as Eli's question lingered, sharp as the salt in the air. I turned away, pretending to study the horizon. But his words had cracked something open inside me. I wasn't just hiding from him, I was hiding from myself. Back at the cottage, the tension followed us like a shadow. Eli sprawled on the couch, sketching again, his pencil scratching out a world I couldn't enter. I busied myself with chores, chopping wood for the fire, cleaning dishes, anything to keep my hands occupied and my thoughts at bay. But every time I glanced at him, I saw the boy I'd watched grow up and the man who was unraveling me. "Want to go for a night swim?" Eli asked, breaking the silence. His voice was light, but his eyes were serious, daring me to say yes. It's freezing, I said, though my pulse quickened at the idea. Scared of a little cold water? He grinned, tossing his sketchbook aside. Come on, Dan. Live a little. Against my better judgment, I followed him to the beach. The moon hung low, silver light dancing on the waves. Eli stripped down to his boxers, his silhouette sharp against the night. I hesitated, then did the same, the cold air biting my skin. The water was a shock, stealing my breath as we waded in. Eli laughed, splashing me, and for a moment, we were just two people, not stepfather and stepson, not bound by the weight of our history. He swam closer, his face lit by moonlight, and I felt that pull again, dangerous, undeniable. You're not as tough as you pretend, he said, treading water inches from me. His voice was soft, teasing, but his gaze was steady. And you're too bold for your own good, I shot back, trying to keep it light. But my heart was racing, and not from the cold. He reached out, his hand brushing my arm under the water. Maybe I just know what I want. The words hit like a wave, and I froze. I should have swam away, put distance between us. But I didn't. I let his touch linger, let the current pull us closer until our breaths mingled in the dark. Back at the cottage, we dried off by the fire, wrapped in blankets. The silence was heavy, charged with everything we weren't saying. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, his damp hair curling at the edges, his eyes fixed on the flames. Dan, he said finally, why do you keep fighting it? Fighting what? I asked, though I knew the answer. He looked at me, unflinching. You feel it too. I know you do. My throat closed. He was right, and that terrified me. I'd spent years building walls around my past, my desires, my truth. Claire had been my anchor, but she was gone, and now Eli was here, seeing through me in a way no one else ever had. It's not that simple, I said, my voice low. You're my stepson, Eli. There are rules. Rules. He scoffed, leaning closer. Rules didn't stop Mom from loving you, even when you were a mess. Why should they stop us? His words were a blade, cutting through my defenses. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this was impossible. But the truth was, I'd been running from myself since I was his age, and I was tired. I don't know what you want from me, I said, my voice breaking. I want you to stop hiding. He reached for my hand, his fingers steady against my trembling ones. I want you to be honest. With me. With yourself. I pulled away, standing abruptly. This can't happen. Eli. It just can't. But as I walked to my room, his words echoed, and the ache in my chest told me I was already losing the fight. The next day, I avoided him. I took a long walk along the cliffs, the wind howling in my ears, trying to drown out the memory of his touch. I thought of Claire, her laugh, her warmth, the way she'd loved me despite my flaws. Had she known? Had she seen the part of me I'd buried? When I returned, Eli was painting on the porch, his canvas a riot of blues and grays. "Storm's coming," he said, not looking up. "You can feel it in the air." I nodded, but I wasn't thinking about the weather. I was thinking about him, about the way he made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. That night, the storm hit, rain lashing the cottage, thunder shaking the walls. Eli knocked on my door, his silhouette framed by a flash of lightning. "Can't sleep," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Can I come in?" I should have said no, but I didn't. He sat on the edge of my bed, his damp shirt clinging to his frame. "You ever think about what Mom would want?" he asked. "All the time," I said, my voice rough. "She'd want you to be happy," he said. "Not stuck." I looked at him, his face half lit by the storm, and I saw Claire in his eyes. But I also saw something else, something that was just him. Just us. "Eli," I whispered, "this is dangerous." "I know," he said, leaning closer. "But I'm not afraid." And then he kissed me. It was brief, tentative, but it set my world on fire. I pulled back, my heart pounding, guilt and desire warring inside me. "We can't," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Why not?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "Because of what people will think. Or because you're scared of what you feel?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The storm raged outside, but the real tempest was inside me, tearing down everything I thought I knew. The storm didn't let up, and neither did the chaos in my chest. Eli's kiss lingered like a bruise, tender and impossible to ignore. I lay awake, the rain hammering the roof, his question, "Why not?" looping in my mind. Morning brought a fragile calm, the sky bruised purple but quiet. Eli was already up, brewing coffee, acting like nothing had happened. But his glance, quick and knowing, told me he hadn't forgotten. I wanted to talk, to set boundaries, to rebuild the walls he'd torn down. But every time I opened my mouth, the words dissolved. "Let's go fishing," I said instead, grasping for normalcy. "Weather's clear enough." He nodded, grabbing the rods. "Lead the way, Captain." We took the small boat out, the ocean still restless from the storm. Eli handled the oars with ease, his movements sure, his silence loud. I focused on the task-baiting hooks, casting lines, but my eyes kept drifting to him. The way his shirt clung to his shoulders, the way his lips curved when he caught me staring. "Got something on your mind, Dan?" he asked, reeling in his line. "You know I do," I said, sharper than I meant. He set the rod down, leaning forward. "Then say it. Stop dancing around it." I gripped the edge of the boat, the wood rough under my palms. What happened last night, it was a mistake. You're my stepson, Eli. There's no world where this works. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. You keep saying that, but you didn't stop me. You didn't want to. I looked away, the horizon blurring. He was right, and that was the problem. I'd spent my life choosing safety over truth, and now the truth was staring me down, wearing my stepson's face. Eli, this isn't just about us, I said. It's about Claire. It's about what's right. Right for who? He shot back. For the neighbors. For some rule book you're clinging to. Or for you, so you don't have to face yourself. His words stung, but I had no answer. We fished in silence, the boat rocking gently, the weight of his gaze heavier than the waves. Back at the cottage, I tried to keep busy fixing a loose shutter, checking the weather radio. Eli painted, his brushstrokes fierce, the canvas a storm of color. I wanted to ask what he was feeling, but I was afraid of the answer. Afraid of myself. That evening, we walked the beach again, the sand still damp from the storm. Eli stopped to pick up a shell, turning it over in his hands. Mom used to say the ocean keeps secrets, he said. You think that's true? I think the ocean doesn't care about our secrets, I said. It just keeps moving. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. Maybe we should stop caring too. Before I could respond, he stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. My instinct was to pull away, but my body betrayed me, staying still. His fingers laced with mine, and I let them. Eli, I started, my voice a warning. Don't, he said, his voice soft but firm. Just let it be. We stood there, hand in hand, the waves crashing at our feet. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my secrets lift, if only for a moment. The next day, I woke to a text from my sister, Laura, checking in on the trip. How's bonding with Eli going? She asked. I stared at the screen, guilt clawing at me. How could I explain this? How could I tell her I was falling for the one person I was supposed to protect? I didn't reply. Instead, I found Eli on the porch, sketching the dunes. Laura texted. I said, sitting beside him. She's asking about us. He didn't look up. What did you tell her? Nothing yet. I hesitated. What would you tell her? He set his pencil down, meeting my eyes. I'd tell her I'm finally seeing you. The real you. His words hit hard, stirring something I'd buried long ago. In college, I'd had a boyfriend, Mark. A quiet guy with a laugh that made me feel safe. But I'd ended it. Scared of what it meant. Scared of the world's judgment. I'd chosen Claire. Chosen a life that fit the mold. Now, Eli was pulling me back to that crossroads, and I didn't know which path to take. That night, we cooked dinner together, the kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and rosemary. Eli was lighter, joking about my terrible knife skills. And I let myself laugh. Let myself forget the rules for a while. After dinner, we sat by the fire, a bottle of wine between us. You ever think about what you do differently? He asked, swirling his glass. All the time, I said. But regrets don't change the past. Maybe not, he said, leaning closer. But they can change the future. His hand rested on my knee, and I didn't move it. The fire crackled, the room warm and small. And for a moment, I let myself imagine a world where this was okay. Where we could be more than stepfather and stepson. But then the phone rang. Laura, checking in again. I answered, my voice tight. And as I listened to her chatter, reality crashed back in. This wasn't a world where we could be free. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Laura's voice was a tether to the world I'd been trying to escape. You sound off, Dan, she said, her tone sharp with concern. Everything okay up there? I glanced at Eli, who was watching me from across the room, his wineglass still in hand. Yeah, I lied, my voice tight. Just tired. Long day. She didn't buy it, but she let it go, promising to call again tomorrow. I hung up, the weight of her words settling like damp sand in my chest. Eli raised an eyebrow, but I shook my head, not ready to talk, not ready to face the truth. The next morning, I woke early, the cottage quiet except for the distant hum of the ocean. Eli was still asleep, his sketchbook open on the coffee table. I flipped through it, careful not to wake him. Page after page of storms, jagged cliffs, and a recurring figure, a man, alone, staring out at the sea. My throat tightened. Was this how he saw me? Lost. Unreachable. I needed air. I grabbed my jacket and headed to the beach. The dawn light pale and cold. The waves were relentless, mirroring the churn in my mind. I'd spent my life running from who I was, first with Mark, then with Claire, and now with Eli. But he wasn't letting me run anymore. When I returned, Eli was up, frying eggs in the kitchen. You're up early, he said, his voice casual but his eyes searching. Couldn't sleep, I said, avoiding his gaze. Thought a walk would help. He nodded, sliding a plate toward me. You're running again, aren't you? I froze, the fork halfway to my mouth. I'm not running. You are, he said, leaning against the counter. Every time we get close, you pull back. Why? Because this is wrong, I snapped, louder than I meant. You're my stepson, Eli. We can't just ignore that. He crossed his arms, his jaw set. You keep saying that, but it's not about me being your stepson. It's about you being scared to want what you want. His words cut deep, exposing a truth I'd been dodging for years. I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't understand. But he did. Better than anyone. That afternoon, we drove to a nearby lighthouse, a crumbling relic perched on a cliff. The wind was fierce, tugging at our clothes as we climbed the spiral stairs to the top. From there, the ocean stretched endless, a reminder of how small we were. Eli leaned against the railing, his hair whipping in the wind. "You know why I love painting storms?" he asked. "Why?" I said, bracing myself. "Because they're chaos, but they're honest. They don't pretend to be anything they're not." He turned to me, his eyes fierce. "I want to be like that. I want us to be like that." My heart pounded. "Eli, you don't know what you're asking for." "I do," he said, stepping closer. "I'm asking for you to stop pretending, to let yourself feel what you feel." His hand found mine, and this time, I didn't pull away. The wind roared. The ocean churned. And for a moment, it was just us 12 people, raw and real, standing on the edge of everything. Back at the cottage, the air was thick with unspoken words. We cooked dinner in silence, the clink of dishes the only sound. After, we sat on the porch, the stars sharp above us. Eli was quiet, his sketchbook closed for once. "I found someone. Back at school," he said suddenly, his voice low. His name was Ryan. We dated for a few months. I tensed, unsure why the confession stung. "What happened?" "He wanted me to be someone I'm not," he said, staring at the ground. "Someone who fits in, who follows the rules." I couldn't do it. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. "And now?" "Now," he said, looking at me. "I'm here. With you." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to tell him to stop, to go back to school, to find someone his own age. But the truth was, I didn't want him to. "Eli," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "this could ruin us. Or it could save us," he said, his hand brushing my cheek. I closed my eyes, letting his touch ground me. For the first time, I didn't fight it. I let myself feel the fear, the guilt, the want. And when he leaned in, I met him halfway, our lips finding each other in the dark. The kiss was slow, deliberate, a promise and a risk. When we pulled apart, his eyes were bright, unguarded. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. I wanted to believe him. But as we sat there, the night closing in, I knew the world wouldn't let this be easy. Laura's calls, the town's gossip, the ghost of Claire, they were all waiting to pull us apart. And yet, for the first time, I wasn't sure I cared. The kiss lingered like the salt on my skin, a mark I couldn't wash away. Morning light spilled through the cottage windows, and Eli was already awake, sketching on the porch. I watched him from the kitchen, his pencil moving with a quiet intensity, and wondered how we'd gotten here, how I'd let myself fall so far. I made coffee, the routine grounding me, but my hands shook as I poured. Last night had changed everything. Eli wasn't just my stepson anymore. He was a man who saw me, who wanted me, and I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. You okay? Eli asked, stepping inside, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. I nodded, avoiding his eyes. Just thinking. About us. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that pinned me. About everything, I said, setting the mug down. It's not simple. Eli. He leaned against the counter, closer than he needed to be. Nothing worth having is. I wanted to argue, to list all the reasons this was impossible, Claire. The age gap, the world's judgment. But his certainty, his fearless want, made my excuses feel hollow. Let's go for a drive, he said, breaking the tension. Clear our heads. We took the coastal road, the ocean a constant companion on our left. Eli drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my knee. I didn't move it. The radio played soft folk tunes, and for a while, we were just two people, not a scandal waiting to happen. We stopped at a small diner, the kind with sticky tables and waitresses who called you Han. Eli ordered pancakes. I got eggs, and we ate in comfortable silence. But under the table, his foot brushed mine, a quiet reminder of what we'd started. You ever think about leaving? He asked, pushing his plate away. Like starting over somewhere new. I laughed, but it was hollow. You sound like you're planning a getaway. Maybe I am, he said, his eyes serious. What's keeping us here? Dan. Memories. Guilt. I stared at my coffee, the steam curling upward. It's not that easy. We've got lives. Eli. Responsibilities. He leaned forward, his voice low. And what about what we want? Doesn't that matter? It did. God. It did. But wanting something didn't make it right. And I was still grappling with the weight of that truth. Back at the cottage, the air felt heavier, the reality of our choices pressing in. Eli sat on the couch, sketching again, while I paced the small living room. My phone buzzed Laura again. I ignored it, but the guilt was a knot in my gut. Talk to me, Eli said, setting his pencil down. What's eating you? I stopped, running a hand through my hair. This. Us. It's not just about what we feel, Eli. It's about what happens when the world finds out. Let them find out, he said, standing. I'm not ashamed of this. Are you? The question hit like a slap. Was I ashamed? Of him? Of myself? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that being near him felt like breathing for the first time in years. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice raw. Not of you. Of losing everything. He stepped closer, his hands on my shoulders. You're not going to lose me. His words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the fear. I pulled him into a hug, needing his warmth, his certainty. He held me back, strong and steady. And for a moment, I let myself believe we could make this work. That night, we sat by the fire, the crackle of wood filling the silence. Eli talked about his art, his dreams of showing in a gallery, of telling stories through color and light. I listened, marveling at his passion, his courage. You could do it too. You know, he said, his eyes bright. Tell your story. Be who you are. I don't even know who that is, I said, staring into the flames. Then let me help you find out, he said, his hand finding mine. We kissed again, slower this time, the firelight painting us in gold. It wasn't just desire, it was trust, vulnerability, a shared defiance against the world's rules. But the world wasn't done with us. The next morning, Laura called again, and this time, I answered. Dan, what's going on? She demanded. You're dodging me, and I'm worried. I'm fine, I said, my voice strained. Eli watched me from the porch, his expression unreadable. You don't sound fine, she said. Is it Eli? Is he okay? He's good, I said, the lie burning my throat. We're just working through some stuff. She sighed. Your family, Dan. Whatever it is, you can tell me. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. As I hung up, Eli stepped inside, his eyes searching mine. She's going to keep pushing, he said. I know, I said, my chest tight. And I don't know how to stop her. Then don't, he said, his voice fierce. Let's be honest. With her. With everyone. I wanted to believe it was that simple. But as I looked at him, I knew the road ahead would be harder than he thought. And I wasn't sure I was strong enough to walk it. The cottage felt like a pressure cooker. Every moment with Eli charged with what we'd done and what we hadn't said. I wanted to freeze time, to stay in this fragile bubble where we could be us. But Laura's calls were a reminder that the world was waiting. I avoided her texts, but each one tightened the knot in my chest. Eli sensed it. You're pulling away again, he said over breakfast, his fork poised over a half-eaten omelet. I'm not. I lied, staring at my coffee. I'm just trying to figure this out. He leaned back, crossing his arms. There's nothing to figure out. Dan, you either want this or you don't. His words were a challenge, and I hated how much I wanted to meet it. But the weight of Claire's memory, of my role as a stepfather, pressed down hard. It's not about want, I said. It's about what's possible. Everything's possible, he said, his eyes fierce. You just have to choose it. We spent the day apart, an unspoken agreement to cool the tension. I walked the beach, the wind sharp against my face, while Eli stayed back, painting. I thought about calling Laura, confessing everything. But what would I say? I'm falling for my stepson, and I don't know how to stop. She'd never understand. When I returned, Eli was on the porch, his canvas a swirl of blues and blacks, a storm frozen in time. You okay? He asked, not looking up. No, I said, sitting beside him. But I'm here. He set his brush down, his hand finding mine. That's enough for now. It wasn't, but I let myself believe it. That night, we cooked together, moving around each other with an ease that felt dangerous. Every two-cha brush of his hand, a shared smile pulled me deeper. After dinner, we sat on the couch, the TV flickering with some old movie neither of us was watching. Tell me about Mark, Eli said suddenly, his head resting on my shoulder. I tensed, surprised he remembered the name I'd mentioned in passing. Not much to tell, I said. We were young. It didn't work out. Why not? He pressed, his voice soft but insistent. I sighed, the memory sharp. I was scared of what it meant, of what people would think. I ran from it. He lifted his head, looking at me. You're still running. I wanted to deny it, but he was right. I'd been running my whole life from Mark, from myself, from the truth. But Eli wasn't letting me run anymore. I don't want to lose you, I said, my voice breaking. You won't, he said, his hand cupping my face. But you have to stop fighting this. We kissed. And this time, I didn't hold back. It was raw, desperate, a release of everything I'd kept locked away. When we pulled apart, his eyes were bright, and I saw a future I hadn't dared imagine. The next morning, reality crashed in. Laura showed up at the cottage, unannounced, her car crunching on the gravel drive. Surprise. She called, stepping onto the porch, her smile faltering as she saw my face. Laura, I said, my heart sinking. What are you doing here? Checking on you, she said, her eyes narrowing. You've been weird all week. Eli appeared behind me, his expression guarded. Hey, Aunt Laura, he said, his voice too casual. She hugged him, but her gaze stayed on me, sharp and searching. Over coffee, she asked about the trip, her questions probing. I deflected, but Eli was quieter than usual, his knee brushing mine under the tablia, secret we couldn't share. After lunch, Laura pulled me aside. What's going on? Dan, you're acting like a stranger. I'm fine, I said, but my voice betrayed me. She crossed her arms. Is it Eli? Is he in trouble? No, I said too quickly. He's good. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. When she left, promising to call tomorrow, I felt the walls closing in. She knows something's up, Eli said, watching her car disappear. She doesn't, I said, but I wasn't sure. That night, we walked the beach, the moon a sliver in the sky. Eli stopped, facing me, his hands in his pockets. We can't keep hiding, he said. Not from Laura. Not from anyone. I know, I said, my chest tight. But if we do this, it's not just about us. It's everyone, Laura. Your friends. The whole damn town. I don't care about them, he said, stepping closer. I care about you. His words were a balm, but they couldn't erase the fear. I pulled him into a hug, the ocean roaring beside us, and wondered how long we could hold on before the world tore us apart. The air was thick with the threat of truth, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Laura's visit had cracked our fragile world. Eli and I moved through the next day like actors in a play, careful not to touch, not to look too long. But every glance was a spark, every silence a confession. We went to town for supplies, the routine a flimsy shield against the tension. In the grocery store, Eli reached for the same carton of eggs I did, our fingers brushing. My breath caught, and I pulled back, glancing around, half expecting someone to notice. No one did, but the fear was a pulse in my veins. You're paranoid, Eli said as we loaded the car, his tone light, but his eyes serious. Maybe, I said, gripping the steering wheel. But we have to be careful. Careful's just another word for hiding, he said, leaning back in his seat. I'm tired of it. Dan. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because he was right. And I hated it. Back at the cottage, Eli painted while I tried to read, the words blurring on the page. My phone buzzed another text from Laura. Call me. We need to talk. I ignored it, but the knot in my gut tightened. That evening, we built a bonfire on the beach, the flames licking the night sky. Eli sat close, his shoulder against mine, the heat of the fire mingling with the warmth of his skin. Tell me something real, he said, tossing a stick into the flames. Something you've never told anyone. I hesitated, the weight of his request pressing down. When I was your age, I said finally, I wanted to run away. Not just from home, but from everything expectations, rules, who I was supposed to be. I didn't, but I wish I had. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the fire. You can still run. With me. The idea was intoxicating a new life. A new us. Somewhere no one knew our story. But it was a fantasy, and I knew it. We can't just disappear, I said. There's too much at stake. Like what? He challenged. Your job. The house. None of that matters if you're not happy. I wanted to believe him, to let his courage carry me. But the world wasn't as simple as he made it sound. The next morning, Laura called again. And this time, I couldn't dodge her. I'm coming back tomorrow, she said, her voice firm. And you're going to tell me what's going on. I gripped the phone, my heart racing. There's nothing to tell, I said, but the lie tasted bitter. Eli overheard, his expression darkening. She's not going to stop, he said after I hung up. We need to decide what we're doing. What do you want me to do? I snapped, frustration boiling over. Tell her I'm in love with my stepson. That'll go over great. He flinched, but his voice stayed steady. You love me. The question stopped me cold. I hadn't meant to say it, but there it was, raw and undeniable. Eli, I said, my voice breaking. I don't know what this is, but it's real. And it's terrifying. He stepped closer, his hands on my face. Then let's face it together. We kissed, desperate and fierce, the world falling away. But Laura's call lingered, a warning that time was running out. That night, we lay in bed, the darkness a cocoon around us. Eli's head rested on my chest, his breath warm against my skin. What happens when we go back? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. But we'll figure it out. He lifted his head, his eyes searching mine. Promise me you won't run. I promise, I said, though the fear still gnawed at me. The next morning, Laura arrived, her face set with determination. All right, Dan, she said, sitting at the kitchen table. No more bullshit. What's going on? Eli was outside, painting, but I knew he was listening. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking. It's complicated, I started. Uncomplicated, she said, her voice sharp. I looked out the window, at Eli's silhouette against the dunes, and made a choice. I'm in love, I said, the words heavy but true. With Eli. Her face froze, a mix of shock and disbelief. What did you just say? You heard me, I said, my voice steady now. I love him. And he loves me. She stood, pacing, her hands in her hair. Dan, he's your stepson. This can't happen. It already has, I said, meeting her eyes. And I'm done hiding. Laura left without another word, her car kicking up gravel as she sped away. I knew this was just the beginning, that the fallout would be brutal. But as Eli stepped inside, his hand finding mine, I felt something new: courage. Fragile but real. Laura's departure left a silence louder than the ocean. Eli stood beside me, his hand still in mine, but the weight of what I'd done pressed down hard. I'd told the truth, and there was no going back. She'll tell everyone, I said, staring at the empty driveway. Let her, Eli said, his voice fierce. I'm not ashamed of us. I turned to him, his green eyes steady, and wished I had his strength. It's not that simple, I said. This could cost me everything: me job, my friends, my family. He squeezed my hand. You've got me. That's enough. But was it? The world we'd built on this beach felt like a dream, and reality was waiting to tear it apart. We spent our last day at the cottage packing, the air heavy with unspoken fears. Eli was quieter, his usual spark dimmed. I caught him staring at his canvas, the storm painting unfinished, a reflection of our uncertain future. "You okay?" I asked, setting a box by the door. He nodded, but his eyes said otherwise. "Just thinking about what's next." I sat beside him, our knees touching. "We'll figure it out. Together." He smiled, but it was fragile. "You mean that?" "I do," I said, and for the first time, I believed it. That night, we walked the beach one last time, the stars bright above us. Eli stopped, facing the ocean, his hand finding mine. "This is where it started," he said. "You didn't push me away." I pulled him close, my arms around him, the waves a steady rhythm. "I'm done pushing," I said. We kissed, the world falling away. And for a moment, it was enough. Back home, the fallout came fast. Laura had talked to my brother, to friends, to half the town. My phone buzzed with messages. Some curious, some angry. "How could you? What about Claire? He's your stepson." I ignored them, but each one was a cut. Eli moved into my place, his dorm too far for the daily commute. We tried to build a routine, cooking, watching movies, stealing moments of normalcy. But the whispers followed us. At the grocery store, eyes lingered. At school, colleagues avoided me. I hadn't been fired yet, but the principal's talk was looming. Eli, though, was unshaken. He painted, filled the house with his art, his laughter. "They'll get over it," he said one night, his head on my lap. "Or they won't. Either way, we're here." I wanted to believe him, but the fear was a constant shadow. Then came the letter, anonymous, slipped under the door. "Freak. Leave town." My hands shook as I read it, and Eli's face darkened when I showed him. "We can't let this win," he said, crumpling the paper. "We're stronger than that." The next week, I met with the principal. "We've had complaints," she said, her face tight. "Parents, staff, they're concerned about your situation." "My personal life is my own," I said, my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. "It's not that simple," she said, echoing my own words from weeks ago. "You're a role model. This could affect the students." I walked out, my job hanging by a thread, but I felt lighter. I'd spent too long hiding. I wasn't going back. That night, Eli suggested we leave. "Start over," he said, his eyes bright with possibility. "Somewhere new, where no one knows us." I thought of the cottage, of the beach where we'd found each other. Where would we go? I asked. "Anywhere," he said, pulling me close. "As long as we're together." We chose Seattle, a city big enough to get lost in. I quit my job, sold the house, and we packed what mattered. The move wasn't easy. Laura didn't speak to me, and most friends drifted away. But Eli was my anchor, his courage a light I followed. In our new apartment, with rain tapping the windows, we built a life. Eli got into a local art program, his paintings gaining attention. I found work tutoring. My days quieter but fuller. We weren't perfect, arguments flared. Doubts crept in, but we faced them together. One evening, Eli hung a new painting in our living room, a ship. Battered but sailing. The horizon bright. "It's us," he said, his arm around me. We made it through the storm. I kissed him, my heart full. The world hadn't made it easy, but we'd chosen each other. And that choice, hard won and human, was enough.